In the dead of night, when the moon is high and ill winds blow, and the banshees cry and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
Good evening. It is 12 midnight, the paranormal hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. I'm your host, Chief Lawson. Ghost to Ghost is a podcast to discuss all paranormal and parapsychology subjects. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats, so tell your friends, tell your family. Come listen to Ghost to Ghost. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. Tonight's topic is the Djinn. And my guest for this evening is Jennifer Verne, research manager and podcast producer for Ghost to Ghost.
Good evening.
And Heather Lawson, our case manager and podcast director.
Hello.
So tonight, and I'm going to let Jennifer lead. She did a really good job. This is a piece that she wrote and did a ton, and I mean a ton of research on. And this is a really, really intriguing subject. A lot of people, and you're seeing it more and more, it seems like today, pop up in modern culture and modern literature. So I'm going to let you start out and take her from there.
So I really wanted to delve into the Djinn. And I mentioned way back in March, hey, let's do our next episode on the Djinn, shall we? I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
It's a deep rabbit hole.
Oh, rabbit holes. It's a whole warren of rabbit holes. So my idea of Djinn, and I'm pretty sure pretty much Western idea of Djinn, is the Genie from Aladdin, right?
Sure.
You rub that little bottle and out pops the Genie and gives you 3 wishes, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not really. That is not what the Djinn are. There are elements of that, but that's really not what the Djinn are. They are so much more. And really, it kind of goes back to that discussion we had in December about the Mesopotamian ghosts, the first ghosts, the cuneiform tablets, and all of that culture and mysticism. That's where the Djinn originated, because the Djinn are pre-Islamic. We kind of think of them, or the Islamic world is really immersed with Djinn.
Yes.
It's very much a part of their belief systems, but even though they are mentioned in the Quran, and even though in the Quran God created the Djinn, they really are pre-Islamic. And the Muslim community recognizes that they are pre-Islamic, that have been integrated into their...
Incorporated.
Right. And so here's where the disclaimers come, because none of us on this table are Muslim, none of us in this table are from Middle Eastern descent. So we are talking about something that's not part of our culture. So we're going to do the best we can, give it the respect it deserves, and know right off the bat, I'm only giving you the information that I've been able to research for the past 3 months. And there are people who've studied this topic in length and in depth through their culture, through their religious...
Pretty much their whole lives.
Their whole lives.
Oh, yeah.
This is a way of life, especially in Muslim culture in Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, the Middle East, even in Southeast Asia, Malaysia and Indonesia. They have Djinn cultures, and it's separate. But I could go on and on and on now. But I can't, because we're not a folklore podcast. We're not a historical podcast. We're not a religious podcast. We're a paranormal podcast. So how did I
love your energy with
bring
this.
all
I
this?
really do.
I mean, I'm getting so excited. I've completely gone off script already. So let's kind of pull it back a second here. This was my historian, my folklore person coming out.
Sure.
I have gone so many different directions with this script. I've had to rewrite it 3 times, which is why it's taken us a couple months to actually do this podcast. I didn't know where to start. There's just so much. So let's pull it back a little bit. Like I said, they've been mentioned in the Quran. And once I decided to delve into it, I really thought, let me find somebody from that culture who knows what they're talking about, who has more of a history. And I found a podcast called The Hidden Djinn by Rabia Chaudhry, and I'm going to highly recommend it. If you guys enjoy this podcast, have gotten psyched already just by my enthusiasm here, you need to check it out, because it is phenomenal. And she even just brushes the surface, but she's got on experts and really delves into their history, their deep, deep history. So, again, I can't even begin to give you a breakdown on all the Djinn. It's just so much. So I really recommend that you find her podcast and listen to it. And it's just amazing. So,
Chief Lawson here, your host of Ghost to Ghost. We'd like to take this opportunity to take a quick break. We'll be right back with you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Chief Lawson with Spirit Ghost to Ghost and Spirit Indiana Paranormal. We would like to invite you to the Fort Wayne Paracon at 216 East Washington Boulevard, Fort Wayne, Indiana, at Freemasons Hall, September 29th and 30th. Please come join us. Tickets are reasonable. You can get those online, and certainly we'll have a good time. There's some notable celebrities coming. We have Grant Wilson, Dustin Perry, and Chris Williams, not to mention Brian Murray, and as we say, Sean Pittman, poor Sean. Dave Spinks will be there, Jenny Flack, and Dana Strickler. So please take the time to come out and enjoy. And most importantly, Spirit Indiana Paranormal will be there. We'll be on site. We'll be shooting a episode of Ghost to Ghost. So you don't want to miss that. Again, tickets are very reasonable. They can be found online. If you go online to FW Paracon, Fort Wayne Paracon, this is a first for Indiana. The first time for Fort Wayne Paracon. First time for a Paracon in Indiana. So please come out and see us. Come out and see me. We'll be at the booth. We'll have the entire group there. Thank you so much.
And now we return to our broadcast.
As I said, they're pre-Islamic, and the Quran states that God made 3 forms. He made angels from light, men from clay, and jinn from smokeless fire.
Mm-hmm.
So
I thought that was interesting, because the more I read that, I went and actually pulled a Quran out and ran through this a bit, and it is very interesting to how, because actually, I and Heather were just talking about the Christian belief of the Nephilim. Nephilim, brother.
Yes.
And how that could be entertained, or there's areas here where that could rub. I mean,
parallels?
Yeah. The Book of Enoch.
Parallels.
Yes.
Book of Enoch. Yes.
Rabia talks about the Book of Enoch and how they're the watchers.
And the thing is this appears in Jewish religion.
Yes.
Enoch. It appears in more. We were just talking about this. It appears in Hinduism. About every form of culture has some sort of relation. I may not necessarily call it just initially jinn, but it sure is an exact description of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm going to go in here in just a little bit and talk about that, find some parallels too. So when you say smokeless fire, like what?
Yes.
So angels are light, right? That's one element, like maybe the 5th element. Mm-hmm. So the 2 elements that make up humans, water and earth, made of clay, right?
Yep.
The jinn are going to be wind and fire.
Yes.
Okay, so you can kind of think of that. Those are the elementals of the earth.
Sure.
Okay, the God would have used to do that. So jinn is an Arabic word with a Semitic root called Jan. Mm-hmm. Jan. I know I pronounced that wrong. It's Jann, but it's more like jinn.
Yes.
Okay. And it means to hide or adapt. Mm-hmm. And it is a cognate of a word majan, to be possessed, or janan, garden, Eden, or heaven is what that word means.
Wow.
So you can kind of see where we're going there.
Oh, yeah.
They live in an invisible world adjacent to our own, so it's a parallel world that we cannot see. They have free will, they are good, and they are bad. When they die, they are also judged by God. Even though they are mortal, they have a very, very long life. There was one story about a jinn who was a household jinn that we'll talk about in a little bit, called Suleiman. And he stated that he was alive at the time of Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad.
Yes.
And that's how long his life was. They have magical capabilities. They can fly. They have shape-shifting abilities, and they have possession abilities. They can possess the humans. Mm-hmm. So there's several folklore stories about how they exist, and a couple of them actually deal with Adam and Eve. And the one story that I'll tell you real quick is that Eve had 40 children. She didn't think she could take care of 40 children, so she discarded 20 of them. Adam came around looking for them, and she's like, they died. They're they're gone. We only have these 20. Adam prayed and prayed because he did not believe that. He had a feeling that something was wrong.
Yes.
And he asked God to protect them. So God granted them protection, but that protection, they must live underground and only come out at night.
Wow.
Okay, so we have lots of ties.
Yes.
We have lots of ties to other cultures around that have stories about, earth dwellers or people that only come out at night, things like that. Gnomes, elves,
yes,
fairies, things like that.
The Fae.
The Fae, totally. The Fae. Okay. So another lore was that God had created, like we talked about, the Djinn from the burning wind. And that he created a female, then she created 30 eggs. Each of those eggs produced a different type of Djinn. Shape-shifting Djinn, flying Djinn, demon Djinn, ghouls, so on.
Yes.
Shape-shifting animals, we think of those weird animals as witches' companions, black cats and whatnot.
Sure.
Cats are very prominent for Djinn to shapeshift into. Flying
Familiars.
serpents, familiars.
Yeah.
Flying Djinn could be seen as what we think of as mythical dragons. Exactly, dragons.
Yeah.
To categorize Djinn, not really easy, because while there are supposed to be maybe 3 or 4 groups of Djinn,
Yes.
they all bleed and leak through to each other. You have household Djinns, water Djinns called Merids, mermaids. Okay. The Arwan Djinn are child protectors. So when you hear stories of children seeing and talking to ghosts, in the Middle East or in the Muslim culture, if your child is speaking with an invisible person, they're interacting with a Djinn.
Wow.
So what we need to think about right now is, because when I started this, I'm like, well, Djinn are ghosts. That's just all there is to it. That's not the case.
Not necessarily.
No, because to us, a ghost is the spirit of a deceased person, right?
Yes. Well, or something that had lived on Earth before.
Right.
Animal, sometimes even
So with
projections.
Muslims,
Sure.
an invisible entity working side by side with you or haunting your house, that's a Djinn. That's not the spirit of a deceased person. That's a totally different entity. So Djinn are not ghosts, although their behaviors are ghost-like, what we would consider ghost-like.
Chief Lawson here, your host of Ghost to Ghost. We'd like to take this opportunity to take a quick break. We'll be right back with you.
Good evening. This is Jennifer with Spirit and Ghost to Ghost podcast. Come join us at the FW Paracon, the first annual Fort Wayne Paracon, September 29th through 30th, as we kick off with Kathy Hahn, the very first ever Indiana Paracon. Come meet today's hottest paranormal superstars, Grant Wilson, Dustin Perry, Chris Williams, Rochelle Stratton, Brian Murray, and many more. You'll be able to sit down with a variety of psychics and mediums, have tarot card readings, and it's going to feature a variety of vendors offering merchandise and other experiences. You must come. If you haven't had a Paracon before, join us, please. See you there.
And now we return to our broadcast.
And rubbing the bottle,
Yes.
I Dream of Genie, you rub the
Yes.
lamp, right? And out comes and she grants you 3 wishes. Djinn don't really do that. There are some things about them having and being tamed by an item or being inserted into an inanimate object. But that isn't their sole purpose. Leprechauns, though. Leprechauns, they protect with gold.
Sure.
Pots of gold, right?
Yes.
Leprechauns are tricksters, right?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Probably closest thing to a Djinn you'll ever see.
Precisely. So is it possible that the stories of leprechauns, because we see Djinn all the way through the Middle East and, Asia and whatnot, but you don't hear of Djinn in the Western cultures, right? You hear of other things like leprechaun. In Native American lore, you've got your nature spirits and everything.
Coyote.
Right. Coyote.
Yeah.
Skinwalkers, right?
Yes.
So a lot of that kind of mirrors what the Djinn
Wendigo.
realm is.
I mean, even the Wendigo.
Exactly. So our leprechauns are imps. They're tricksters, kind of like Djinn. If you capture a leprechaun, they will grant you 3 wishes. So that kind of is maybe where the 3 wishes for the Djinn came, because maybe leprechauns are Djinns.
Okay.
The Fey realm is closely tied to ancient Djinn lore.
Sure.
The Celtic lorist Alexander Carmichael has a story of the fairy, that they are fallen angels who have to live underground and can only emerge at night. Remember back to that Adam and Eve story about the 20 children?
Yes.
And the fairy king says, very similar to Djinn lore, the fairy envy humanity because men go to heaven with God after death, but the fairy do not. On Judgment Day, they pass into annihilation. And the lore says the king asked, is there any hope? Do we have any hope of being with God upon death? And when he was told there was none, he was very despondent, and he took his followers by boat back to their homeland in Irania.
Ah.
The folk Celtic legend says that the fairies came from the Middle East, from Iran.
Yeah.
That would be the homeland of the Jinn, right?
Exactly, yes.
And so when you look at the fairies, now this is one of those rabbit holes I fell down.
Sure, yeah.
When you look at the fairies, they live in Ireland, the Celtics, right? The Emerald Isle, green. You think of green, you think of
just
emeralds.
about all elementals come from.
Right.
I mean, they come from Celtic lore. They come into England, Wales, Scotland, and a lot of people, both times I've been over there, they're very firm believers. Same way that Hindus. And I was listening to a sermon from a Muslim temple, and they were talking about this, and some of the elders were laughing. Older elders said, "Don't laugh. This is real. You better listen."
Yes.
And this is the same way when you're in England. A lot of the older folks believe real heavily, and they are, they're very funny about things. There's certain nights that they'll leave a shot of whiskey out for the leprechaun, and, it's just...
Yes.
Milk?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Milk. You said milk.
Milk, yes.
Did you know that there are Jinn that you leave a milk offering to? And that ties straight back in to Celtic and Scandinavian and Slavic lore about leaving milk out for your house spirits. In the Middle East, they leave milk out for their house jinns.
Well, Josh Gates had I don't remember which...
A lot of house spirits.
A lot.
Oh, yes. Well, Josh Gates did a program, and I can't remember which one it was. Poor guy, he's had a few. But he went to a Tibetan temple, and this particular temple was quite a ways up, as most of them are, in a mountain. But all it was dedicated to, it was Tibetan, I think it was Hindu, was all the jinns. And they had statues. It was like, I think he said it in a very respectful way, but it was like a shopping mall for jinns. Certain ones you left whiskey and cigarettes for, and certain ones, and these people were hauling this stuff up there to leave offerings for those jinns. And my thought in comparison, and I'm going to lose a lot of Catholic friends here probably, but immediately was, looking back in Catholicism, how we light candles in Catholicism, and the saints. The saints are, that was one of the biggest divisions in Freemasonry and open Christianity between Catholicism, was the fact that Catholicism worships saints. And open Christianity, a lot of open Christianity look at that as deities and idols, and they won't do that. And that's where a big division comes in the open Christianity. But yeah, I remember distinctly the particular episode, and there's just so many jinns, and they play into house spirits, and a lot of people that purge their homes and cleanse their homes, especially we're dealing with white sage and smudge sticks, and so they do that because that helps appease the house spirits. It also cleans the energy, what we believe today, but for a lot of believers that also helps. That's an offering to the house spirits.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think that I've got very broad spectrum ideas on spirituality and religion, which we won't go into because we're going to open a whole new Pandora's box, but you've got to have a base somewhere. And I think that this pre-civilization, this ancient Mesopotamian, as I discussed in the Mesopotamian episode, was a basis. When it branched out and went to different cultures in different areas, people took that old knowledge and morphed it into their religious bases. Yeah. And you can see that. I mean, we could go down a gazillion Warren rabbit holes about that. But when you said the mountains, in Djinn lore, in the Middle East, they have a home, which is a mountain home. And the mountain home is made of and contains emeralds.
Yes.
And jewels. Green emeralds. Go back to the Fae with the Emerald Isle, right? Yeah. With the Emerald Isle. So anyway, that's just so much more you can go down.
Before we move off of that, I got to bring this up because we actually didn't get to show it to the kids this year. But St. Patrick's Day is a big thing for me. I put on a kilt, I drink entirely too much, and I bagpipe and so forth. And one of the things though that I love about St. Patrick's Day is we always used to watch it when the kids were small. Is Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Oh,
It's a Walt Disney film. Yeah, it's one of our favorites. We have in our archives, and you gotta love it. You've got all the legends in there, the Banshee, and oh my God, you see the real Gaelic and Celtic roots coming out, and I love the show. But that's a really good parallel and depiction of dealing with tricking, and of course at the end he's riding the carriage and it's over with, and he's substituted his life for his daughter, and he tricks him into making that fourth wish, and it's just how the people were, but what I started to say earlier, when you're over there, the people are very careful about not offending. Careful when you throw your wash out. They used to say years ago, your wash water, because you could hit one of the little people.
The folklore of Wales is just.
Oh yes.
And that's another podcast that I have been listening to, and I was drawing so many parallels to that podcast.
We need to do that
the folklore
once.
Of Wales.
Yeah.
It's The Ghosts and Folklore of Wales by Mark Rees, Rees, and I was listening to that at the same time I was listening to these Djinn stories, doing this research, and they're just intermeshed. You cannot separate. You just can't.
No.
So if you're interested in that, delve into this world, because it's utterly fascinating, not just from a supernatural perspective, but from a historical folklore perspective. And then to get back to what we talked about genies and lamps.
Yes.
Do genies inhabit inanimate objects? They don't really, but they can. And so there is an ancient story in Islam.
But you got to remember that when in the 60s, they had a TV show, and they had an awful cute genie and an awful nice lamp.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Yes, she was. But in the book of Enoch, talks about Solomon. Mm-hmm. Solomon controlling the Djinn through a signet ring with the seal of God engraved with
Solomon's
4
seal.
letters. YHWH.
Mm-hmm.
This was a fascinating story, and I know that Chief has a lot of information on this story, right?
Well, yes. In Freemasonry, every lodge, every Blue Lodge, is based on the fact and laid out accordingly to what the equivalent of King Solomon's temple would have been. You have the porch entering, you have the entrance to the south and the east and the west, and you have the inner sanctum sanctorium, or the Holy of Holies, and it's laid out in that exact same pattern. It's a representation of that temple. And of course, a lot of Freemasonry deals with King Solomon himself as being the first Grand Master of Masons, and so there's a lot of lore that leads back to that. And I think in Freemasonry, it's kind of like in some very closed-minded areas of Christianity, is the fact that a lot of them kind of ignore the fact of the Book of Enoch. They don't want to deal with it. But Solomon had a ring that God gave him. It had the infallible initials of God on the ring, and the ring was called Solomon's seal. All kings of that time that ruled an area had a signet ring, a seal. Now, this served a purpose. Generally, what happened was when you sent communication from one kingdom to another kingdom, a king would take and drop wax and imprint his signature, which sealed the letter and didn't allow you, to break it very easily. You had to pop it open, and it would expose that the letter had been opened, and that kept the messenger from ever reading it, because sometimes that penalty was death for damaging that seal, and they were protected with their life, and they would take it to whomever it was intended, and they would break the seal, open up, and read the letter. And so all kings had signet rings at the time, and he was good friends with King Hiram of Tyre. I got that backwards, didn't I? Yeah, King Hiram of Tyre, and he controlled the forests of Lebanon. So at the building of the temple, King Solomon oversaw the stoneworkers, the artificers of metal such as silver and brass and bronze, but the wood was oversaw by King Hiram, and he had a signet lamp that, or signet, I'm sorry, a signet ring that, as well. But all kings did. If you look back into Christianity in the book of Revelations, it talks about breaking seals. Well, those were the seals that were placed by kings or persons of authority. Judges had seals. Back in the book of Judges, if you were elected a judge over Providence, which was much like a governor in some respects, any edict you sent out had your seal at the bottom of it. That showed your authority and showed your command. So this ring, because of the incantation on the ring, it empowered him to be able to have control over different elements. That was Solomon's gift. Solomon, and this goes back to God's promise to David, which was Solomon's father, that he would establish his kingdom in strength and in power. And so that was God's promise to man fulfilled. And he used that ring to, well, in most cases, especially in the book of Enoch, which clearly illustrates he used that to control a lot of people say spirits and a lot of people say jinn. But either way, it controlled something that helped him build the temple. If you look at the temple, it was said that the temple's stones were so perfectly fit that no mortar was needed. And if you can see the same construction in the temples of the Inca, the Mayan, the Egyptians, all the pyramids, they have no mortar. They fit so perfectly, none was needed.
Right.
And they would take the rough ashlars and they would hew them down to a perfection, and that perfection would allow them to fit them in. And they did this in 3 classes. They had 3 classes of people at the building King Solomon's temple. You had inner apprentices, who were young men who worked in the quarry, and they would take the designs and they would hew the stones and they would fit them as best they could, and then they would send them to the construction site. Now this was done as a respect to God, so that there was no sound of hammers or chisels at the temple. And then at that point they would take the fellow craft, which are middle-aged guys, up to even including my age, would take these stones and find which ones would best fit in what locations to make them work. And they were overseen by the overseers, which were the master masons. And they were, and to this day, that's your 1st, 2nd, 3rd degree masons. Master masons oversee everything, but there was one grand architect at the building King Solomon's temple, and Hiram Abiff was his name, and he was, as the Bible tells us, the widow's son, and he was the one that oversaw everything. But still, Solomon had that control. Now, it doesn't give us particulars, although we know there's a lot of legend with King Solomon. We know about the seal. We know about King Solomon's mines, and they've been searching for the mines for years. And I think there's several places they found them from. And actually, I have which I don't have it viewable, but I have, sitting up on the top shelf, I have a gavel, and the head of it was made at King Solomon's mines. It's made from soapstone, and the handle is made from the forests of Lebanon, from the wood of Lebanon, and it was awarded to me many, many years ago. But I think you have to look at that and bring that in, because I think the Djinn was possibly what we were looking at controlling here. He's controlling spirits, and I think that could very well be.
Those were the spirits.
Those were the spirits, yep. And then the Islamic tradition of that story is that once King Solomon died, the power of that seal and the power that controlled the Djinn was finally broken. And the Djinn said, "We will not forget what you have done."
Yes.
And so evil
was
already existing, because
the
Djinn can be evil or bad. And they took that resentment with them throughout their long lives after Solomon's death, once they were freed from that ring.
Well, and Judaism believes that, because most kings, and you see this with the papal organization with Catholicism, because every time a papal father dies, they take the ring and they take a chisel and they split it and mar the image so it can never be used again. That was the same way in kings. Once a king died, his son would have to develop his own seal. And we see this with King Charles right now, with the King Charles Ascension. If everybody looks, and a lot of people don't realize, but if you look, everything that he owns, gets a change of seal.
Yes.
And it usually has a crown, and it has, His Highness, King Charles, and so be HHKC. And I actually saw a video on this not long ago, and how the changeover and how in-depth that is. And they have to change all the letterhead and whatnot. All this changes out. All the seals change out. And a lot of the furniture that can be altered has to be altered to reflect the royal seal. Well, that's the same way here. So when King Solomon died, it was said that at the direction that because at this point King Hiram was told that when he passed that he was to ensure before his next in line would take that throne, that ring would be destroyed, so that and that was part of supposedly the deal that was made to have that power. But King Solomon had power that no other kings had, including King David. Right. And they believe that King David would have had the power had he not, had his relationships with Sheba and so forth. And that's again,
it's funny you bring up Queen Sheba.
Yeah. Oh, did I lead into something?
You sure did.
Because I haven't read the script all the way through, so a lot of this I'm just hitting as we go.
She's not in this script, but I was just thinking in my head, how am I going to transition out of this historical and into what we need to talk about, the paranormal? Sure. And you just gave me the greatest segue.
Go for it.
Because Queen Sheba and Lilith, from Jewish lore, Lilith, they are thought to be Djinn. So
Adam's
delve into
first wife,
that.
And this goes to show you that it's nothing unusual to have an ex-wife.
No, exactly. So Lilith and Queen Sheba was thought to be a shape-shifting Djinn with backward feet. And if that interests you, please go to Rabia Chaudhry's The Hidden Djinn podcast, because you will just adore it. So with all that quick background laid, like I said, we're not a historical, religious, or folklore podcast.
And we got down a deep hole there.
We did, but it's so easy with this Djinn. It is so easy. So let's try and get back to where we are at the paranormal scope. If you have a belief in Djinn, if you're a Muslim, if you're Pakistani, if you're from India, if you're from Southeast Asia, anything paranormal, and I mean anything paranormal, UFOs, alien abduction,
Djinn.
Okay, is Djinn. The Djinn are responsible for everything that is not physical, man-made. If we can't explain it, the Djinn are
one thing that this service had going this morning, and I'll never forget it when I listened to it, he said, is the belief that, if I want my arm to move, the Djinn have to engage it to move. Even though, and I did find it amusing, though, even with that, the Djinn still falls under the power. In Islam and the Muslim religion, they still fall under the power of Allah. They're still judged. They still have to stand judgment.
Yes.
But he made it very clear they have their own rules, their own kingdom, their own judgment.
Yes.
It's not linked to ours, but it's very different.
Yeah, it actually is pretty linked, and we'll get into that when we get into the exorcist portion.
Yes.
Yes. So I remember coming across a YouTube video of a man, and he's walking through a house.
Yes.
It could be a house anywhere. It's dark. You got that green night vision glow going on.
Sure.
And then you hear a person behind the camera speaking, and you're like, I don't know that language. And then subtitles appear. Okay, so we've got a Middle Eastern language talking, and subtitles are appearing in English. And they're walking, and you see something, and you hear something, and then a noise, and he jumps, and the camera shakes. And then you look down the hall, and this door swings open, right?
Yes.
You realize you're watching a paranormal video, right?
Sure.
And then chaos when the door opens and everybody's screaming, Djinn, Djinn, Djinn.
Yeah.
Not only do you see the word in English, Djinn,
sure,
but you hear him saying, Djinn, Djinn. He's running out of a haunted house because the Djinn are in there.
Yes.
Okay. So everything paranormal is Djinn related. In Rabia's podcast, she says that you can't get together with friends and family without sharing Djinn stories. Just like we would around a campfire. We're going to share ghost stories. They're going to share Djinn stories.
And oddly enough, this broadcast this morning was close to Halloween. And apparently every time it gets very close to Halloween, and in Islam religion, they talk about the Djinn. They invite them to come pray with them. And he was telling everybody, he says, we say this in our prayer because it welcomes the men and the women, but it also welcomes the Djinn.
Yes. Yes, lots and lots of prayer.
Yes.
And ritual and rites around the Djinn in the Islamic tradition that I have found out.
Oh, yes.
So much more that I could possibly even attempt to scratch or do justice to. But one story that she told were two boys that she knew from her youth. They were on an overnight train ride. Now, you'll picture the cabins on a train like Harry Potter, where you have two seats facing each other inside a little cabin area, right? So picture that. And it's a night ride that mom's sleeping. The two boys are being goofy and just trying to make each other laugh without waking up mom, right?
Sure.
Doing what you can, but don't wake up mom. And across from them in the other seat is a woman all dressed in black with her head turned to the window. And as they're getting more and more rowdy and worked up, she just turns to look at them and gives them that adult look, like straighten up, right?
Yeah.
And then she turns her head back to the window, and as she does, she stretches her legs out. From underneath her burqa come her feet, but they're backwards.
Oh.
And they knew immediately, that's a Djinn. We better shape up. That's a Djinn. It's a Djinn in human disguise.
Is it gonna interrupt you if I ask questions about the three types of Djinn, or is that because that's probably coming later in the script?
It's kind of coming later in the script.
Let's hold up. I don't want to ruin that part of it. Yeah.
Well, it's a little bit, because once you start breaking down the three layers of Djinn, then you start getting into the massive rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Because they're not all succinct.
Exactly.
They bleed, and different people have different ideas of what. Sure. Is that an Ifrit or not an Ifrit? Is it a myriad or is it an Ifrit?
Yeah.
You've got really the Shadin. I hope I pronounced that right, Rabia. Shadin, which are Satans. But they're the weakest of the evil Djinn. The Ifrit is the most powerful of the evil Djinns. So I tried not to break them too much.
Yes.
Because I didn't want to get into that religious aspect of them.
Mm-hmm.
But as we go through here, the Vitale, there's a Vitale Djinn.
Can I stop you one second?
Yeah.
I'll ask you a quick question. Did you catch the link for the Arabian Nights for this? The parallel,
Yes, that's a really deep, and I thought, okay,
I don't want to start us down that rabbit hole, because I know that is deep.
That is deep.
There is some parallels there. I do want to point out, though, because I learned a lot. And me and Heather were talking about this earlier today, and most people think the Arabian Nights, which is the American term, it's actually 1001 Thieves.
1001 Nights.
Nights, yeah, Nights. Well, there's several pronunciations of it. Some of them call it 1001 Thieves, and it has. But the funny thing is, it's not one story; it's a collection of stories.
Right, correct.
And people don't understand this. But now, my without going down the rabbit hole. There's some neat stories in there about jinns, and of course the most famous, of course, is Aladdin. Aladdin is one of the most famous, and actually his uncle is not Jafar, but anyway, I still like the name Jafar. I always did. My daughter had a friend.
He had a ring along with the lamp.
Yes, he did. Yes,
and didn't he turn into a snake? Which is one of the most common shape-shifting animals, is a snake.
And the ring had it was actually an entity that held a Djinn. There was two Djinns in the story, really. They phased this when we did the candy coating. It's like I always told somebody, I said, if you read the original Alice in Wonderland, it's not exactly like Disney said. Right. It's the same way with a lot of the stories you read. Yes, yeah, the Brothers Brothers Grimm, there's some very, once you read those, it's like, what the hell happened,
Well, like we said, any supernatural folktale legend that we find throughout the world has got a Djinn counterpart.
Sure.
It does.
Now, I will tell you, the connection here is that Florence, who was one of the two Masons who formed the shrine, the ancient and accepted nobles of the mystic shrine, and they don't use the long title very often. They abbreviate it, and it's a hell of a long abbreviation. You want to know the truth of it. But being a noble of the shrine, I'll tell you, it's a great organization. They do wonderful work. They provide children that have burn situations, cleft palate, orthopedic. And we have hospitals, and we don't take any money. I mean, all that comes now. We did start offering, hey, if you got insurance, we'd like to use it, because that helps us out, helps us help more kids. But we transport them for free and everything without getting into commercial for the order. One of the things I was tying in mostly to this was the shrine. And William Florence was one of the two men. Fleming and Florence were the two that actually created the shrine. And Florence was an actor, and a lot of things that came out for the shrine was due to the fact that his acting career at that time, he was appearing in Arabian Nights, and so it had a lot of, the shrine became a organization that had a lot of Persian and Arabic overtones, and that has stayed ever since. That's why we wear the Moroccan red fez, and the red fez, we have our own story for that, which is very moving, and maybe I'll share that one day. But anyway, it's a very neat story about the old red fez, but it represents charity, and it represents the taking care of one another, the commitment that's there, and one of the things about the shrine is that, most everything in there has some sort of attachment that's somewhat Arabic. And of course, we were just talking, that's been a big problem today, because a lot of the imperial Shriners want to get away from a lot of the Arabic overtones because of the world the way it is, that happened after 9/11, after a lot of the Muslim upheaval, and a lot of people's fear Muslims and so forth at the time, and so they kind of distanced themselves. Like one group in particular that comes to mind was called the Arab Patrol, and it became the Murah Patrol. Murah was our temple, and they named it after it. And they deleted a lot of the words involving Arabic, and our acronym, Ancient Accepted Nobles of the Mystic Shrine, was shortened because originally it's Ancient Accepted Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. And we're not Muslim. We have nothing to do with the Muslim religion. It was just a type of demir or type of genre that was used, and
right. So, but it was a tie-in.
It was a tie-in,
And why have to narrow that down?
Oh, it's terrible because it's killing the history and the culture of the shrine itself. But anyway, the fact of the matter is the thing I'm bringing in with that is the fact that the Arabian Nights, that was something that influenced the shrine, the creation of the shrine.
Right.
And I mean, it's a neat book, but one of the things me and Heather found out is, again, everybody thinks the Arabian Nights, we think, Aladdin and lamp. Well, there was a whole lot more to it.
There's much more.
Oh my God! When you read the story and go ahead.
Sinbad.
Yeah, Sinbad, yes. Oh my God. And so, it's a lot more fun than that. And I don't want to get down that rabbit hole because you're right, it's a deep one. I don't want to get back in where I can't get back out. But my God, buy a copy of the Arabian Nights and just read it. It's neat.
Yep.
It is really neat. So, all right, where are we going here?
I think we're going to pause for a commercial break.
Yeah,
right
let's
now.
do that. Let's take a commercial break. We'll be right back with you. I would like to announce that we in Indiana will have our first Paracon, and that will be in Fort Wayne. The Fort Wayne Paracon will be September 29th through the 30th. Yours truly and the Spirit group will be there. All three of us will be there, along with our entire team. We will be there for both days. Also appearing will be Grant Wilson, Dustin Perry, and Chris Williams, among others. There's a lot of notable names coming up. Now, this will be held, ironically, at the Masonic Temple in Fort Wayne, so I'll be right there at home. Unfortunately, there's no Shrine Temple, so there'll be no bar. Anyway, but,
Too bad for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, it's Dry County. But anyway,
Not a
so
Dry County.
yeah. But no, it actually it's a good time. Tickets are on sale. I can't ask you enough to support this. This is the first annual. If we have a second annual, it'll depend on how well this comes out. So get a chance, get your tickets. The tickets are very reasonable. There are 2 nights involved here, 2 days rather, and there is going to be a Gatsby Ball the first night, so there is tickets for that available. I don't think the VIP tickets are sold out quite yet, but there are in that process. So again, wonderful lady putting this on, and I can't encourage you enough to think about this. Again, that's September 29th and 30th. It's at the Freemasons Hall in Fort Wayne, Indiana, so make sure you're there. We will be there. Spirit will be there, and we'll have a booth there. If you want to come see us, we're going to be doing a live broadcast there, so by God, make sure you stop and see us, talk to us a little bit.
What's the name of her paranormal team so we can look that up?
She actually does not have a team. She does not. No, I
really
was highly impressed with this lady, and I mean, we talked for quite a while on the telephone, and she has been very interested and very involved in paranormal, and she really wanted to do something to help out. But yeah, her name is Kathy Hahn, and she actually doesn't have a team, and this is a shout out to Kathy. Kathy. But her and her husband are working very hard to put this on. They, again, they're paranormal enthusiasts. They don't have a team.
Holy cow,
but
that's a big undertaking.
Oh, yes. They know the people. They know a lot of the people, and they went to Michigan Paracon, which, by the way, folks, we will be at Michigan Paracon again this year. So we won't have a booth, but we'll be walking around. You'll see our black shirts with our Indiana outline with the ghost that says Spirit, and feel free to stop us. We'll be up there both days. We'll be in and out of classes. But the Michigan, I tell you what, if you've never been to a Paracon,
Michigan was great.
Oh, my God.
Michigan was great.
Well worth it. And they're all good, but my God, you got to go to one. It's the place to be.
Find one and go.
Oh, yeah. And I will say that when you're in the middle of August and you got the ungodly heat of Indiana, there's nothing like Sault Ste. Marie. Although I don't want to be there in the middle of January, but
August is
pretty nice. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So we'll check out Kathy Hahn then and see about getting tickets for Fort Wayne.
And there'll be more. We'll have some more advertisements coming up. But again, if you can make it, please be there. Now back to our program.
So to bring this back to folklore, like we were talking about, let's look at vampires. Our modern day vampires, you can trace that back to the Djinn. The Vitale are known to inhabit the bodies of the dead. There's an 8th century Sanskrit story of a king who was subjected to riddles by a hanging corpse in a graveyard. Now, if anybody has seen Dracula, Gary Oldman version, when he's in that room and he's hanging upside down and he's this bat-like creature all emaciated.
Oh, yes.
Think of that, because that's what you're going to picture when we're looking at this story. There's a legendary king, and I'm not going to pronounce his name because I know I'm going to get it wrong. It is Vikrama. Vikrama. Okay.
That looks good to me.
So he made a promise to a sorcerer that he would capture the Vitale. So he goes to this graveyard and he finds the Vitale hanging upside down from the tree.
Yes.
So the Vitale is going to tell him stories. Okay? Mm-hmm. Each story he's told is going to end with a riddle.
Sure.
If the king cannot answer the question correctly, then the vampire will remain in captivity. But if the king answers the question correctly, the vampire is going to escape and run away.
Sure.
The king knows the answer.
Gotta have the riddle part in there.
Yeah,
it's part of Djinn, yeah?
Yes, exactly. So, every time the Vitale tells the story and gives the riddle, the king knows the answer, so he's going to say the answer. And the Vitale escapes.
Yes.
Every time. It isn't until the king learns humility and keeps quiet, even though he knows the answer, that he is able to keep the Vitale, the vampire, in captivity. It took him 24 times before he remembered to keep his mouth.
Humility is a hard lesson.
It is a hard lesson. So there we go with our inhabiting dead bodies, right? And
sure.
Corpses hanging in graveyards, right? Djinn are also shapeshifters. They can take the form of any animal. Usually cats, dogs,
sure.
That sort of thing. Mostly snakes, okay? But never a wolf. We'll get to that. There is a 17th century story about Sheikh al-Haradi. He was a renowned holy man in Upper Egypt. He was believed to have returned after his death in the form of a large snake. During his lifetime, al-Haradi was known as a famous healer, and he was miraculous with his cures. Now, whether he was a Djinn in human disguise who was able to use his healing powers, or whether he used Djinn to heal is up for debate. But irregardless, he was so well loved that he was after death transformed into a snake.
Wow.
And even to this day, there is a shrine to him that is revered and worshipped still in northern Egypt. So during that story, I was thinking about healing. And I think later on I bring this up. But I just want to mention it real quick because maybe we'll take it out of that section and talk about it now. Healing.
Okay.
the Jinn are seen as our guardian angels, right? So
Yes.
in Islam, there are the angels, men, and Jinn. They're separate.
Yes.
In Christianity, we have humans and we have angels.
Angels.
If you have a priest, they're going to pray to the guardian angels to help in healing, right?
Yes.
We use prayer all the time
Sure.
for healing,
Yes.
sending out positive energy and positive
Sure.
vibes, however you
Yes.
want to look at it. You call on your angels for help and support and guidance.
Yes.
People in the Islam culture, in Muslim culture, will call on Jinn for guidance. Especially in the Southeast Asia, in those regions, Jinn are really used as helpers and healers.
Yes.
There are Reiki masters in Southeast Asia who will call on their Jinn to come help them heal.
Yes.
I found that amazing. There are psychics, Muslim psychics, who will call on Jinn to guide them
Yes.
in their readings and in their healings.
Well, and this is something that years ago I discovered a Reiki master that did massage. And, that was channeling of energies and flows and correcting energy flows. And it's incredible the knowledge that they have. I think someone asked me, did it help? I don't remember. It's been that long ago. I've already had other aching pains by then. So, it's a moot point. But yes, I remember they were very much probably 50% of the session was channeling energy, things done to correct energy flow and so forth. And that's kind of interesting that they would bring a Reiki master in for that.
Right. I thought that was...
Yes.
I would have connected Reiki with Jinn.
No, but again, it seems to be in about everything, yes.
Right,
Yes.
right. So I said that they don't inhabit wolves. Why don't they inhabit wolves?
Yes.
Wolves in Native American culture are very revered, right?
Sure.
In a lot of cultures, wolves are extremely special.
A lot of people use them as spirit animals even, yeah.
Right,
Especially
precisely.
American Indians.
Precisely. So Jinn do not shapeshift into wolves. And actually, wolves will hunt evil Jinn.
Oh, really?
Most specifically, a ghoul.
Oh,
Now, we hear ghoul, we think of a ghost, right?
yes.
Okay. Ghouls are nasty, nasty ghosts, right?
And the actual term probably came from the Djinn society.
It sure
Yeah,
did.
most
Yes,
certainly.
ghoul
I-
is
I
an
watched-
Arabic word for Jinn.
Actually saw that on YouTube.
Yes,
Our
yes.
English word for ghoul came from the Arabic word.
For Jinn. It's really interesting. So ghouls can encompass several different, what we would consider Western
Sure.
folklore. Incubus, succubus, vampires,
Sure.
and sirens. You know
Yes.
the Greek siren, the call
Oh,
of the
yes.
female siren, right? Okay, that is a ghoul. Ghouls are seductresses. So there's a story of a man who was entranced by a beautiful woman. And I'm just going to give a brief synopsis.
Sure.
There's a much better telling of the story that Rabia does in her podcast. So you'll hear this again if you listen to that. He marries her against his father's wishes, but she's beautiful. He has to marry her. So he marries her. Only he realizes that she never eats. They sit down to dinner and she never eats. So he finds out that she's leaving their bed at night and then coming back early in the morning. So he decides he's going to follow her. He follows her to a graveyard where she goes into a mausoleum and she meets with a pack of other women and they are feasting on the dead. He goes back home. She comes home. He decides he's going to confront her and tell her he knows what she is. She's a ghoul. Well, she denies it. They're going to go to bed. She pretends to fall asleep. Once she knows that he's asleep, she attacks him, bares her teeth, tries to get him and drink his blood. She is exceptionally strong. We're seeing a lot of vampire lore here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
A lot of
starting to fold
vampire
in.
lore. She's supernaturally strong.
Sturger may had a...
Exactly. But he's able to fend her off and he kills her. He buries her. The next night, she comes back from the dead. Vampire, right?
Much like any ex-wife.
But this is a ghoul, Chief. This is a ghoul. This is a Djinn ghoul. And again, he overpowers her, puts her back in the grave, goes the next day, finds her cold, dead body, right? She's dead. She comes back again the next night.
This is going to involve a stake at some point.
No stake.
Oh,
He cuts off her head.
He burns the corpse. burns the corpse. And for my supernatural fans, you all know
Salt
you've got to
and burn.
salt and burn.
Yeah.
And salt and iron are two elements that the Djinn fear. They are repelled by salt and by iron. And I'll get that. I almost went somewhere, but I don't. I want to.
Yeah, I almost did too. I have two things I'd love to add in there with railroad spikes. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
So there are many, many stories about ghouls, just like this one. And again, you can see the Greek sirens. The incubus and succubus, sleep paralysis, those are all caused by Djinn in Muslim culture. If you have that sort of situation happen, that is a Djinn who is coming to you. Yeah. Now, it could be positive, it could be negative. There are Djinn attachments that the Djinn has fallen in love with you.
Sure.
And has attached itself to you. That could cause problems for you later on. But, you know, it's not necessarily evil.
Sure.
Djinn can be good, they can be bad,
either.
you know, all that stuff.
Good or bad, either one, yeah.
Right, right.
And then there's some that are neutral. I have heard that in Hinduism, there are some that neither, it depends on whether you gain their favor. If you gain their favor, they're very positive. If you don't gain their favor, they're almost like a demon, you know.
Right, right, exactly. So, into the religious scope. Okay, so we've just kind of talked a little bit about this. And back in our Mesopotamian episode, we talked about spells and priests and that sort of thing. This all comes into the same region here. So in ancient times, and even now in modern day, the line between priest, healer, witchcraft are all blurred, right?
Sure.
Today we have voodoo practices, right? With spells and summonings and Ouija boards. Believers in Djinn...
Voodoo, hoodoo, yes.
Right. Believers in Djinn have the same thing. They believe you can summon Djinn.
Yes.
A lot of them don't like to use Ouija boards. They don't want to summon things. They don't want to open portals.
Sure.
Because you don't know what you're getting into. And they have complex prayers, rites, rituals that need to be followed to get rid of a Djinn possession. Just like Catholicism has exorcists, Muslims have exorcists as well. But they're, again, very quiet about it, you know?
Sure.
Very, very quiet about it. And like I said earlier, this is where I went off script a little bit, but the modern healers and Reiki practitioners will use Djinn for their healing. And Djinn can possess and have exorcists just like in Catholic circles.
Yes.
So the one question that comes up in this culture is, how do you determine a Djinn possession from a mental illness?
Sure.
Or from
it's
a
no different
depression?
than a regular demonic possession or infestation.
Exactly, right.
How do you prove the difference? Yeah.
Right. How do you prove the difference? And so there are people who are strict Muslims who a family member is having a mental issue, or even a case of autism, where that family is so religiously bound that they think that their loved one is possessed by a Djinn.
Sure.
There's no other way.
There's no other it is a Djinn causing the affliction.
Sure.
So that is such an interesting rabbit hole to go down too, because the connections between all of these religions and philosophies with the Djinn and with what we consider demons is mind-boggling.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Mind-boggling. Yes. So to bring it back, households and haunted ghosts. That is probably the biggest subset that we want to look at. And now that we're at the end of the podcast, we're going to look at it.
Hey,
because there's just so much.
You had to say this to get to this place.
Exactly, exactly. So the house Djinns are Umar. And there's also something called a Kareen. And a Kareen is your constant companion.
Okay.
Or your doppelganger.
Okay.
So there is some debate in Muslim theology whether a Kareen is actually a Djinn or not, or whether it's just your double.
Sure.
They are thought to actually be the little devil speaking on your shoulder, the ones that wants to get you into trouble.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And that everything you do, the Djinn, the Kareen, will experience and feel as well. And when you die, your Kareen will actually die first, and then you pass away.
Oh, goodness.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So, as I was listening to the Djinn stories, I forgot I was listening to Djinn stories.
Yes.
I was listening to ghost stories. So I would just want to go through 3 quick ghost stories to wrap up and see if you guys end up feeling the same, that
Okay.
these are Djinn stories.
Okay.
Okay. So one submitter wrote that they were at their grandparents' house, was huge and unoccupied for quite a while when they were out of the country. Unoccupied homes are a very bad thing. You leave a home unoccupied for too long, it's going to get overtaken by Djinn.
Yeah.
Yes, somebody's going to come in and move in, right? Somebody invisible. So
sometimes not so invisible.
Right. So the maid of the household had her family staying with her, so that the house was not completely unoccupied. And her brother-in-law was sleeping in the veranda when suddenly he heard the sound of anklets. He opened his eyes to see, the little bells on the ankles.
Yeah, that's what I thought we were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he hears that sound, and he opens his eyes to see a woman dressed in, I cannot pronounce this, a complete lengakoli.
I don't know what that is for sure. That one, yeah.
I'm going to assume it's like a
full, full dress. That's Hindu, so I don't know.
Right. I'm picturing a sari, but that's my Western
Well, that's what we know the most.
Exactly.
I mean, yes.
Right. And it asked him not to sleep there. He obviously freaked out and ran off to join his family.
And you should do that if you could ask. Yeah.
He never went back into that house, and she, the poster, is not certain about some rooms of her Nano's house. Another one writes, she was taking a nap in the afternoon and suddenly felt her bed shift, like it would as if somebody had laid down beside her. She turned to look at what it was, saw the profile of a man laying beside her. She could not make out his face. She turned back around, and she couldn't move, which led her to read some verses from the Quran until she felt like she could move again.
Oh. Yeah, it reminds you, my mother would do that. She would get the Bible out and read that. A lot of people would. I mean, when they're that scared, they would do that.
Yes, yes. And one time she was talking about, she was so fearful of a noise in her house that was going on that she just kept reciting this prayer over and over and over. And it was the prayer of protection from the Quran. And she would just recite it over and over and over and over and over, just like a Catholic would do the Hail Mary, the Rosary, right?
Yep.
And so the last one here, a man posted about when he was a child, staying at his nanny's house for the summer, something freaky happened. He was sitting with his mother when suddenly his cousin came into the room to ask how she had gotten inside the house and the room so quickly. Both son and mother were confused since they had been in the room all evening. The cousins told her that just a few minutes ago she was outside in the garden, and when they asked her if she was okay, she said she was tired and went towards the house. The kids followed her to make sure she was okay, but she disappeared out of sight quickly. There's our classic doppelganger, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Most certainly, yeah. Well, and this is such an interesting subject, and I'm going to apologize to Reverend Tim Shaw. We didn't get a chance to cover the iron. Anyway, but I went through a class. Actually, we were just talking about Michigan Paracon. We went through a class, and that got brought up. It's interesting how interwoven and paralleled this is to so many things. And, it certainly leaves a lot to consider.
It does.
It does truly, truly, truly do.
It really, and, there are people like Rosemary Ellen Guiley. She has books on this subject.
Yes.
And she is from the United States.
Yes.
So she has a Western view of this. But she really feels that the Djinn are the trickster element. You'll hear people say about trickster elements all the time.
Sure.
Yes.
All these things that we call demons in the Western world, most people demons are not that prevalent. But this evil spirit type entity could be trickster entities according to people.
Sure.
And she believes that this trickster entity are actually Djinn and that they are actually malevolently doing things. So that's one avenue you can go down. But from understanding the Djinn like I do now, very, very minimally, but the fact that Djinn are not ghosts.
Yes.
then to me that does put Djinn more in a trickster, fae, elemental realm for my thinking right now.
Well, if you go back to the, the elements of creation of races, you're looking at, okay, in the Western, it was men and angels. So are they a form of angel? I've heard a lot of people say, well, angels, most people when they say angel, they're very, they're very, very good and they help. That's not always the case.
It wasn't the case. No. Ancient angels were not.
No. They were messengers and soldiers of destruction, and they were God's soldiers. I mean, they carried out whatever orders were before them. And so
they didn't always like man.
No. Some of the Islamic prayers associated with the Djinn do call on Michael, the angel, and Asmodeus, and some of the other Metatron.
Yes.
That I know from my Catholic upbringing. And to hear them used in this context was completely foreign to me, and utterly fascinating too.
Oh yes.
How intertwined it all is.
Oh yeah.
Which, in my own opinion, means there's something to it.
Oh yes.
Because if every culture has something like this,
yes,
there has to be a source and origin somewhere.
Oh yes, I agree.
That's my personal opinion.
I always go on the old saying. It's an old X-Files thing. It's always every lie leads to the truth, and that actually was taken from an intel community when in dealing with interrogation of people that eventually the lies will all come to the point of origin, and there'll be that speck of truth that will shine out, and that's the key.
Well, the best lie has a grain of truth.
Oh yes. It has to be formulated that way. No, I think this has been a great subject. I think we've covered a lot, and I really do. I think and there's, like you said, there's so many rabbit holes. There's so many times we could have digressed and probably never found a way back. And I mean,
I was making connections to Tolkien. Come on.
Well, I was just getting ready to say that. I was ready to say, that's the thing is when you first brought that up in the origins of man, I'm thinking back to the Vala, and we were talking about how they were cast. I mean, oh my God!
I went straight to the Valar.
Yes,
I did, and I'm just like, I can go anywhere and everywhere with this.
Well, they've come out with a movie I haven't seen yet. It's on Tolkien's life and growing up and his
formation.
Haven't seen it either. No, but I'm really wanting to see that. It's one of my favorite authors. So, well, I guess we've covered a lot. I know that. So, that's the conclusion for tonight's episode of Ghost to Ghost. We really hope you enjoyed it. I know we did. And Jennifer, she did such a great job. This episode, Ghost to Ghost, was written by Jennifer Verne, and she done a wonderful job. Had a lot of energy put in here, and I mean, it was a good story. It truly was, and I hope you really do enjoy that. We have some more interesting episodes coming out, but that is all we have tonight. All right, listeners, welcome to Ghost Story of the Day. Today's presenter will be Jennifer Verne, our research manager on Spirit.
Today's Ghost Story of the Day, The Haunted Police Station, Ramool, India. A female ghost terrorized Ramool police officers working the night shift. More than 10 officers reported the ghostly activity. Invisible forces overturned tables, chairs, and police officers reported being strangled and pushed. In fact, some even complained of severe chest pain, as if from the pressure of a disembodied weight sitting upon their chests. The police officers became so spooked that when they arrived for work in the evening, rather than sit in their usual seats, they clustered around the front door. After speaking with the villagers, the officers were informed that a young woman had in fact died while working in the mill, and they confirmed that her spirit was said to still roam the premises. They reported that the machines of the mill had been heard many times, even when it was empty of workers. One local, hearing the officer's plight, brought in a tantric, which is the Eastern equivalent of an exorcist, to rid the station of the ghostly visitor. After performing his ritual and capturing the spirit in a red pouch, he hung the picture of the deity Meldi Mata and the pouch on the wall. And although the police officers are still a bit leery, they have stated that all unusual spirit activity has come to an end. To ensure the young woman's soul stays at rest, however, the Ramool police officers continue to offer up prayers to the Meldi Mata shrine that remains on the wall to this day. And that was from A Ghost a Day by Maureen Wood and Ron Kolick.
There you go, folks. That was our ghost story of the day. We hope you enjoyed both Ghost to Ghost episode and the Ghost Story of the Day. Join us again. Remember, our podcast is published on the 15th and 30th of every month. If you have any questions, reach out to us at info@spiritindiana.com. Thanks for listening to Ghost. Again, I'm your host, Chief Lawson. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats on the 15th and 30th of the month at midnight. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, maybe have a question or subject you'd like to ask about on air or be used on the show, please email us at ghosttoGhost@spiritindiana.com, ghosttoGhost@spiritindiana.com. I want to thank my production staff on Spirit, Jennifer Verne, our research manager and our producer, and Heather Lawson, our trainer on Spirit and our podcast director, for helping make these podcasts possible. My chief of staff, Andrew Brooks, for his guidance and help on the scripts, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and remember the truth is out there. Good night. Ghost to Ghost podcast and its contents is the property of Spirit Paranormal Ltd. All rights reserved. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. You may not, except with written permission, use or distribute its contents for commercial use. Spirit Indiana Paranormal, covering the Hoosier State since 2002, Indy's oldest parapsychology investigation group. If you're experiencing what you believe to be paranormal issues, reach out to us for help at www.spiritindiana.com or call our hotline at 317-883-9103. Again, that is www.spiritindiana.com or our hotline at 317-883-9103. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and the ones you love, and be safe out there.